Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Richest Men in Town podcast. I'm Mike Freeman, and along with my good friend and co-host Tyler Goold, we're excited to welcome you to our little podcast project. Tyler and I are just a couple of middle-aged husbands and dads driven to live our best lives. We want to be better every day, so here we'll be sitting down with great people. Not famous people, but great people that we admire, to learn their secret to living the rich life. Probably not the rich life you're thinking of. Our guests come in humbled and surprised at the invitation and hopefully leave feeling proud and grateful, realizing just how good they really have it. So pull up a chair, stay a while, and raise a glass with us as we toast our guests to the richest men in town.
Mike Freeman, another episode of the Richest Men in Town is on wax. We've just wrapped up the studio. The lights are dimming, but before we leave tonight, let's just talk a little bit about our guest, Chris Smyrnos. It was a treat tonight. Talk to me about Chris and what did you love about tonight?
Yeah, sometimes it's yours, sometimes it's mine, sometimes it's a stranger. Tonight, Chris is a friend of both of ours, and it comes out, right? I mean, it was just super powerful. As I'm hanging out with him, I'm reminded of why I love this guy.
Yeah.
Number one, he's a police officer, right? And police officers, that's a tough spot to be in. And he's happy.
Yeah.
He's faithful, right? He's doing the things that would make that rich life happen. And I just admire that. I think he's an influence in the many roles. We talk about that in our time together, just like that idea of balancing what is expected in the roles and positions that we have in life. And I think he boils it down to, you got to care,
Yeah, 100%.
Leadership and living, striving to be better is about caring about ourselves and the kind of life we're living, and caring about other people. And I love that.
Yeah, it's interesting. You asked him the question, what is he afraid of? And he talks about letting people down. And it's sometimes when you're talking to someone and they say that's their fear, a lot of times it's because they don't let people down, right? And Chris is just one of those guys that just doesn't let people down. And we've both known Chris for a while. And I shared with you off the air that I feel like Chris is just that guy that is always there for people. And he's a super reliable go-to guy. So yeah, I mean, it was powerful tonight. And right out of the gate, Chris pops on with us, and boy, we started sprinting real quick, and we got.
Well, it takes us a little bit to get into Kmart days in Grass Valley, right?
Yeah, I mean, look, over the last couple episodes, we've really kind of hit Pro Wings, MCI phone cards, and Kmart.
Blue light specials, man.
Blue light specials and an actual pizza from Little Caesars, right? So
yeah, things to emphasize the importance of the hinge moment. And I really think that is one of our things, right? We love this idea that lives change, they turn on tiny hinges. Imagine where Chris Smyrnos would be right now if he doesn't pull over the car and talk to the girl walking on the road.
Yeah, one of the things that was evident in that conversation too, in particular, is just his ability to pinpoint key moments in his life and to be focused on remembering those key moments, right? I love that. I think that Chris models the value of remembering. He models the value of perspective and the importance of having a good perspective on the good things and the difficult things in his life. And, that those principles that Chris lives are evident in Chris's everyday life, right? This conversation was just as genuine as you could be.
Yeah. And folks aren't going to see this, right? Because it's after the tape, but when it's done, they want to be with him.
Yeah.
Like literally on the video, when we cut it, wife and kids come out, he scores the leftover blizzard, and they're hanging out on the back patio, right? And it's like, that looks pretty rich right there.
Yeah, it was like Norman Rockwell right there, man.
Yeah. So he's doing it right. He's doing it right, and other people are watching. And I love the fact that he doesn't want to be in that light, right?
He's not a limelight guy, but he just exudes light. That's the problem, right?
Yeah, that's the problem. You're gonna attract folks asking some questions. Hey, talk to me about how you're living when he's living the way he's doing it.
Mike, I appreciate you. I appreciate you reaching out to Chris and bringing him on this show with us tonight. I had a blast. I loved every minute of it. I really hope that our listeners are taking a note, trying to find something that is said that resonates with you and apply it, right? Put it to work and see if you can have the same result or a similar result as Chris.
Yeah, and I think there's a couple. Like we're trying to boil this thing down to one, maybe two. Chris might be a two. I love the idea that he poses halfway through, maybe in our conversation, just this idea of stopping every once in a while and having an honest conversation about what's important.
Yeah.
Right. What's important to me right now, and then looking around and saying, are my actions lined up with that?
That's
powerful.
That's powerful. I mean, if we can,
that sounds like a homework assignment,
right? If that's the one thing that we take away, man, that's a great thing to take away. Listen to the episode, absorb some of those words that Chris throws at you, and see what happens in your life by listening to Chris Smyrnos. Enjoy your time with Chris Smyrnos on this episode of The Richest Men in Town.
This podcast is giving me delusions of grandeur with all things involving microphones.
Oh, really? Okay. Well, tell me about this.
I actually want to do high school play-by-play sports. And Kelly's thinking, what are you talking about? You've never done that before. I'm like, A, I'm a sports expert, and B, I have a podcast.
Yeah.
And they got me thinking, right? What else are these things like delusional that I think I can do that I've never even attempted to do, right? I'm like, that looks easy.
I have a list. Like, honestly, you throw it at me, I'll be like, yeah, I could do that. That's not a problem. And that's why I'm sitting here as a 48-year-old man with a torn ACL. You know what I mean? Like, that's sort of.
And I think people that are good at things make it look effortless.
Yeah.
Right? Make it look like they're in slow motion. It's like, oh yeah, I could do that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like Luka Doncic looks chubby and slow.
I do think I could take him.
When I watch that guy, I'm like, I could take that guy.
Yeah.
But the world's greatest basketball players are stymied by that guy. So maybe there's something about chubby and slow,
which then makes you feel like I could be in the NBA. Is that what's going on?
Living in delusion does lead to some slippery slope thinking like that,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I was actually watching a video the other day of somebody squaring off. It was like I don't know, man. It looked kind of like a rec league kind of thing, but I think it was Marshawn Lynch, and they were squaring off, no pads. And the guy was like squared up, like he was going to stop Marshawn, who's been retired for how long? He ran through him like a Mack truck, man. And that guy was writhing around on the ground like he just got shot. So, yeah, you're right.
And there are some careers that I've knocked. Jerome Bettis, the boss, in my mind is like, bro, you scored how many touchdowns from a yard in? Like anyone can do that. Maybe not.
Yeah, maybe not. I mean, to me, that just seemed like the hardest length to try to get through. I don't know. But
just get low, right? Get lower than the guy coming at you, right?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know, man. But I do agree that there is some delusional thinking that could lead to some dangerous situations.
So I need you to write me a letter of recommendation to my wife so I could try out for this thing. She works in the high school, right? And her AD is up there calling plays for freshman football. And I know he doesn't want to be there. And I'm like, put me in, coach. Put me in. I'm ready to play.
Yeah, I think, you get some good hype music going on and you calling the game.
Oh, it's 90%. It's 90% playlist.
Oh, absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I'm going to
get to this annoying point where if Kelly doesn't let me, when we go to these events, guess what I'm going to start doing?
Standing up, doing it.
I'm just going to start doing it where I'm sitting.
Yeah. You're like that scene in Rudy where he's like standing up on the stool and reciting the coach. You're that guy. But we do have a mutual friend who at one point in time, it may still be, I don't know, was calling high school sports. Our friend Cal Hunter. He was a play-by-play.
Yeah.
So maybe there's you could just expand your network, and not only Shasta, but you got the whole North State.
That's big time. You know what I mean? And maybe that's really maybe where I need to land, because honestly, play-by-play in the booth is limited to the audience in the stands.
Yeah, no,
Cal's worldwide, Cal's radio.
Yeah, you need to be on a good AM station somewhere.
So I'm gonna go home. I'm gonna talk to my wife, and I'm gonna go from talking to my life coach Tyler Goold. Mm-hmm. I need to 10x this thing, Kelly.
Yes,
it's not just about being in the stadium. I need a platform where I can be heard by the masses.
Mike Freeman, delete your limitations. Let's go. And let's take the high school play-by-play world.
Hey, to our listeners on the Richest Men in Town, if this ambition of play-by-play for high school blows up and I do go global, I will miss you. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and we will miss you, as a matter of fact. But we will make sure that we have that we play some of the audio evidence for our listeners that you have hit the big time. that you are being heard in Orland, Red Bluff.
Oh, but AM can go internet, you know what I mean?
That's true, man. That's true.
Yeah, my friends in Ecuador right now that are checking in, Richest Men in Town, season 6.
Yes.
You might be able to catch me on a little side hustle.
Yes.
Freshman football.
And we're talking American football for those of our friends in Ecuador. As a matter of fact, we should clarify. Right?
But I can throw in a goal.
Yes,
every once in a while, you know what I mean? I can do something.
Yeah. And I think that will have far-reaching positive impact.
I just lost him just now. Like I'm out.
I think it's a great idea.
The Richest Men in Town is about bringing people together, right?
Absolutely.
Tonight's guest, you haven't talked to in a little bit.
It's been several years. Yeah,
it has been several years, but we are we're bringing in Chris Smyrnos.
I'm excited about this. I'm super excited. I haven't seen Chris or spoken with Chris in many years, but the time that I lived around Chris, he is still remains one of my favorite people.
Yeah, one of mine too. I actually have the opportunity to hang out with Chris from time to time. We serve together in church and actually professionally as well. He's part of the Reading Police Department, does some incredible things to help keep schools safe. So we've had all kinds of good conversations. But as I've connected with him and his life, his wife, his family, I'm watching from the outside. I think he's got something going on, and I'm looking forward to spending some time with him, lifting up the hood, as we say in the biz, right? And asking him a little bit about how he is the way he is and how that's working for him.
I love it. Hey, fun fact. I've done ride-alongs with Chris Smyrnos in his professional career as a police officer.
In the front seat or the back seat?
We won't talk about what
location doesn't matter.
Exactly. Right. You're so many years removed. You just spin it how you want. We were in the same car. All right. Well, let's let him in and we'll just let's catch up with Smyrnos. I'm excited about this.
How are you?
I'm great, guys. How are you doing?
Good.
Fantastic.
You're among friends. Do you mind if we drop the lieutenant business?
I'll let it slide for tonight. Yeah. How's that?
I don't care but I still want to be referred to as captain. I mean, that's just that's how it's gonna go. Okay.
Yeah, commandant. Something you gotta have a better title.
Right.
Than that.
That's right. Yeah.
Well, hey, we were reminiscing. Well, Tyler was fondly reminiscing of some ride-alongs he did with you back in the day, and he would not confirm or deny whether it was the front seat or the back seat. So we're gonna leave that mystery. But that was back when Chris Smyrnos was on the street. Probably Chris Smyrnos is now talk to me a little bit about what you do for the Reading Police Department.
So I'm a lieutenant, as you mentioned, with the Reading Police Department. I'm part of the command staff or the senior leadership of the agency. I'm currently on loan for my department, and I'm serving as the director at SHASCOM 911. It's our regional 911 communication center where we field 911 calls from most of Shasta County, and we dispatch for 3 law enforcement agencies, a fire department, and all the ambulances in Shasta County.
Wow.
And the city of Reading would love for the richest men in town to inform our listeners that the 911 traffic in our area is minimal. There are no bad things that happen in Reading, and no one ever calls you guys. And it's just a lot of playing solitaire and twiddling of the thumbs, right?
It's a regular utopia up here for sure.
So hey Chris, let me reach out. So you and Tyler go way back. We have an opportunity. We go to the same church congregation. I know you professionally. I know you personally. When I reach out to you and I'm like, hey, Tyler and I are talking about Chris Smyrnos on the Richest Men in Town, what thoughts run through your head?
I was really excited about this. I've listened to a bunch of your episodes. There's just some solid guys you've had: Toby Crawford, Brian Grow. I mean, men that I look up to and I think are, some of my, kind of personal heroes in a lot of ways. And so to be asked to join you guys in this capacity is, I don't want to get all, mushy and call it an honor, but it was pretty neat when you guys reached out and said you wanted to chat with me. That means that, maybe I've got something to say that you guys want to hear.
100%.
Well, you can get mushy. You can get mushy because we are honored to have you.
We usually encourage our guests to get real mushy about their time with us. I mean, it's just what we do, But,
all right. You want a big virtual hug? Can we do that?
That's right. Yeah.
This is the part of the program where we talk about a little bit about why we love our guests, Tyler. So as you go to the Chris Smyrnos file in your brain, what comes to mind that might make him RMIT material?
I mean, look, I was telling you, Mike, I haven't seen Chris forever, and we haven't really spoken much, but Chris is one of my favorite people, and it always has been. And we've spent time in a police car together. We won't talk about front seat or back seat, right? That's just what it is. But we got to serve alongside of each other, and I just consider Chris a friend. And I look up to him and his family and kind of what he stands for and who he is. So years removed from being in the same place, I still have the same affection that I did when I was in Reading for Chris. So I'm super excited about tonight because I feel like when you brought up, hey, we should have Chris on the show, I thought, why haven't we yet? Right? It's just, so I'm super excited, Chris, and I hope you know that the way that I feel, even though I probably don't express it like I should through emails, texts, or snail mail.
Well, there's a river, right? There's a river that goes through this, and I can tell you, Tyler, that Chris is an even better man than the man you knew back then.
Have no doubt. When
I hang out with Chris, I feel like he's a guy striving to do the best that he can, and that energy is kind of contagious, right? When we get around people that are striving, it makes us want to maybe double down on our efforts to commit to be better. And but by their fruits they're known, and I have an opportunity to kind of be an outside observer on the Smyrnos family. I know them through school, I know them through church, I just know them personally as great kids, and great kids have a tendency to have some rich parents at home, not rich men in town style parents at home. And so I'm excited I'm excited to have a couple hours to chat with Chris. But hey, Chris, before you jumped in, Tyler, we're going to go somewhere where we've never gone, and it's actually in our pre-show doc. It's a question.
Oh wow!
But
okay.
I don't think we've asked
I have
this.
to read that thing every once in a while, man.
I don't think we've asked this question in forever. So, Chris, we're gonna blow the dust off of one of these questions. Before you came on, I was talking about my delusion of being an all-world play-by-play announcer for high school sports. I blamed the podcast. I blamed this mic in my face for me thinking I might be able to do this job. And everyone around me is like, you're crazy. I don't think you'd be very good at that. But here's the question. Chris Smyrnos, if the notion of failure was not a risk, what would you go after or start doing right now?
So I would want to be a bass player for a relatively famous, band somewhere. I love every time I'm listening to tunes and like a good bass track comes on, I'll kind of sit there and I'll like pretend like I know what I'm doing, and obviously this is where this hand would go, and this is what this hand would be doing, making the notes and everything else.
Yeah.
I was in band, a band geek, through middle school and high school, and I enjoyed that. But there's something about like when I was a teenager, I had a really crappy car. It was a twice hand me down junk Honda Civic, and all I could do was go out and buy the cheapest set of like 10-inch subs that I could find. I built some totally corny like box out of like super thin plywood. I had an amp wired up in the back that was clearly a fire hazard. And I just like driving around and listening to like, hard hitting bass, not like rap or anything like that, but just like a good like bass track. And now, I find myself, like I said, I'll just be kind of like just playing along if there's a good bass track or something on a song. And so, I think if you told me like, hey, you can do anything you want and you're going to be a total absolute roaring success, I would be like, I'm going to go play bass for somebody and just live it up. That's what I would do.
I love that. I love that answer, man. I think I too enjoy good music, and your description of the box and the subs, I just think like how many, like every teenage boy, right? When we were teenagers, wired a stereo system for a car.
Oh yeah.
Like that's just what you did.
I had 6x9s. I had 6x9s in my doors that were too big. So I had like cardboard around the edges. I mean, it was like totally ghetto, but it was mine.
6x9 Pioneers. And I had a stereo that was not actually in, it was kind of hanging there. So
and the trunk rattles like,
oh yeah.
Oh yeah. License plate flying off and all that. So
I can see it right. I can see it right now. Like Chris on the bass, a little Seven Nation Army, little boom, 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 boom.
Oh yeah, man. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Mike goes straight to Seven Nation Army because he thinks that's a stadium song, right? And so when Mike's doing play-by-play, he's feeling the Seven Nation Army.
It's an anthem. Yeah.
Yeah.
No. I think another way to peel back,
right? Jock jams.
Yeah,
that's right. Guitar Hero, we all did that, right?
Oh yeah.
No, I think like if I had to take that question and peel it back in, maybe a slightly more serious way, one of the things that I really enjoy is I enjoy like traveling and seeing other parts of this earth. My wife and I, we've gone to France a couple times, and apparently I look at French real estate enough on Facebook that it keeps popping up on my feed. So if I knew I couldn't fail, I'd probably want to go, live somewhere where I could learn maybe a new language, learn a new culture, learn to maybe appreciate things a little bit better. We've always really worked with our kids we have this thing with our kids right now that when they turn 16, as long as they're, getting good grades and making good choices, they're staying out of trouble. We've told them we will take them anywhere in the world they want to go. I mean, within, relative, limits. Yeah. Because we really want to teach our kids that there's more to this world than, Redding, California or Shasta County. We want them to, hey, maybe I got a kid that wants to go live in New York City or wants to study abroad in a different country or wants to see, there's so much, culture and art and cuisine and all these things out there. It's just, taking a leap and actually going and living in another country like that would definitely be that can be a big thing. So if you told me like, you can go live anywhere you want and you're going to make it and things are going to work out, then I think that'd be pretty high on my list too.
That's a great answer to that question, right? Because that's a huge risk. And we talk about the comforts of home, right? We talk about jumping out of that and into all in, not just visiting, but jumping in and living in a place where everything is different. I think that definitely connecting some new neuron tracks in your brain. You get off the plane and you're smelling things you've never smelled before. You're meeting people, and we've often talked in this context. We're fascinated though by the more that we get to know people that are different from us, we find out that we're all the same, right? And I think that's comforting as well.
Yep, for sure.
Well, hey, so your kids can't talk to my kids because I promised my kid a trip like that when they produce a bachelor's degree. And I also said I will not pay for the spouse. So if you're married,
yeah, I've promised my kids that as soon as they have enough money saved up, they could go do that. So
and take you with them, right?
Yeah.
No, and we try to keep it special. It's the way we've done it is just mom, dad, and kid. So we don't make it a whole family thing. It's just time for us to spend, with that child, and there has to be kind of like it's not just like a go sit and I'll be like on a beach vacation. Like there has to be some sort of like they're studying the language or the history or there has to be some kind of educational component to it. So, but my oldest, she's 17 and a half now, but she wanted to go to France for her 16 trip, as we call it. So we went there last year. We took her out there for about a week, and we stayed in Paris, went out to the coast, and saw this place called Le Mont Saint Michel, which is like this monastery on this rock out in the middle of the ocean, and just like medieval villages. And it's just amazing how much, like how young like our country is relative to, some of those other places out there. And she ate escargot, and, we had more crepes and baguettes than you could shake a stick at. And it was just fun and neat to be immersed in that culture, even if it's a short amount of time. But it's gotten her really excited about, she's talking about, serving a mission for our church. And she's like, man, I hope I get to go to France. And she's taken French for 5 years in school. And so it's just, I think it's had that effect of getting her really excited about the possibility of, really being able to see the world and do something else.
I love that. That's awesome, man.
Yeah.
Well, hey, you do have the misfortune, Chris, of jumping into random thoughts of Tyler and Mike. And I've got one to share. I haven't even had a chance to run this by Tyler, but I've been thinking about these words, right? And this actually probably lines up really well, Chris, with what you see on a day-to-day basis. But I've had a couple of experiences with other people's kids, right? If I were to write an autobiography, it'd probably be other people's kids. I've dedicated my professional life to other people's kids. There's some joys that come from that, and there's some challenges because you don't have any agency when it comes to other people's kids, right? You don't have any control. We've had our hands full professionally with some challenging behavior on the part of other people's kids, and in fact, 2 calls to 911 in the last 2 weeks. So we are keeping Chris's people busy at one of my schools. As we're having these conversations with families, these words come to mind. They're the closing words of the proclamation to the world on the family. And I want to read these to you and get your thoughts as 2 husbands and fathers. It says this: we warn that individuals who violate covenants of chastity, who abuse spouse or offspring, or who fail to fulfill family responsibilities will one day stand accountable before God. Further, we warn that the disintegration of the family will bring upon individuals, communities, and nations the calamities foretold by ancient and modern prophets. We call upon responsible citizens and officers of governments everywhere to promote those measures designed to maintain and strengthen the family as the fundamental unit of society. And that was delivered to the world by the prophet Gordon B. Hinckley and signed by the Quorum of the 12 in the First Presidency of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, I think like 1995.
Yeah,
it's been a little while.
So as I read that, Chris, and you think about what you're seeing on a day-to-day basis, what thoughts come to your mind?
So, you have an autobiography titled Other People's or Other Children's, Other People's Kids. Mine's kind of titled like Other People's Problems. Because it's interesting, like, and I don't think this is like an official statistic, but one of the things that we like to say in my line of work is, we spend 90% of our time dealing with the same 10% of society. People don't call the police when, hey, I just want to let you know I'm having a good day. Life's going great. I don't have any problems right now. I just wanted to see how you're doing. People call us when they're at their worst. And I've seen the effects of the disintegration of the family. I've seen, men and women that have, wielded unrighteous dominion over their people that they're supposed to be caring for, and that they're responsible for. And I've seen the effects of that. I've pulled kids out of back seats of cars where parents were driving drunk and crashed. I've dealt with, families where there's been significant amounts of abuse. And it breaks my heart because, I was very fortunate. I grew up in an intact household. My parents they're still together. And it's actually kind of sappy being around them sometimes. And I had a great upbringing. And so I feel, sometimes that almost makes me feel like what did I do to deserve that? When in my professional life, I've seen so much, discontent. And so I've tried really hard, within my family to like model a lot of the behavior that I got from my parents, and treat, my kids with, respect, my wife with respect. And I've, first to admit, I've been far from perfect in that. And I've had some really hard, lessons that I've learned along that path. But I think that, one of the big things that kind of goes back to, what you talked about, Mike, was the fundamental aspect of the ability to choose, right? So we have the ability to choose for ourselves what we're going to do. Are we going to be righteous, in our families? Are we going to be righteous, with those that we are, that we have charge over? And so, we've really impressed upon our kids, a lot of the stuff comes down to choice. If you're having a bad day, it's totally okay to have the human emotion of, being upset or being sad or being angry. But what you have control, what you have a choice over is, how you react to that. And that's not something anybody can ever take away from you. And I see people that make poor choices all the time. And it can be very disheartening because, there's consequences to those poor choices. And those consequences are really outlined, big picture in what you were saying.
Yeah. Tyler, any thoughts as you think about those closing words of the family proclamation?
I mean, I agree with everything that Chris has said. I just, we live in a tough time, man. And, unfortunately, there's a lot of obstacles, not just for kids, but for parents too, and so, when I see, some of these kids and parents in these situations, I mean, my heart goes out to them, because sometimes they don't have a lot of agency, a lot of choices to be made there, right? So they find themselves kind of stuck in this situation. So it's tough, man. And I think that as you're talking, Chris, I just couldn't help but think like, what can we do to help, create change? I mean, we talk a lot about compassion and mercy and just showing love. And I think that's the key, right? I mean, if we were to boil it down, like what can we do to make a difference in people's lives? Because the problems aren't going away, right? Problems have been there forever and they'll continue to be there. But I think if we as a group of people, we're a little more compassionate and merciful and kind, and we could see some things. Maybe we could move the needle, but my heart goes out to people who are find themselves in that situation, because a lot of times it's not a choice, especially for the kids. It's not a choice that they made. They find themselves there, and you sort of become a product of your environment to a certain degree, right? Until you're taught different. So, if that's the behavior, and that's the way that you've been trained, for lack of a better word, then that's what you're going to put out. And, until there's a different model or a different choice presented, that's what's there. And it's unfortunate too, because we kind of live in a time where, if you wanted to just tell someone that, hey, if we made some choices differently and maybe we inserted God into some things, and not even like with a religious bent, right? We just said God, like something bigger. It's just it's almost taboo, it's almost like, just live and let live. And that's hard to be a party to. But
yeah, it's really hard to talk about permanent change for me without talking about faith.
Yeah.
Right. Without talking about
absolutely
that idea that you are a child of God and you're part of a plan, right? And that agency is huge. I think one of the things that could help, it helps me sometimes when I do look and there's overwhelming things coming at me, or there's some situations that I'm struggling with, is this idea of small wins leading to big wins. Because I think sometimes we're in this mess and it's like, you're trying to picture, what can I do to get out of this mess? And it really could just be, what can I do to get less in this? You know what I mean? Like, how can I climb out versus this monumental Herculean effort to get me out of my current circumstances, whether they're generational, whether they're my choices, whether they're the choices of other people. We do have that superpower of choice, but I think sometimes our perspective is like, what's the big win? How do I get out of here? And it's like, the big win is actually the little win.
Well, and
right?
and the good news is, Mike, is that you see people every day who have created that change for themselves, right? They find themselves in a different circumstance because they've either had someone give them a hand up, right? Or they've found a way to get themselves the sheer will to be in a better spot. So it's possible. So that's the good news, right? And I think that we should, we really need to celebrate those people. And I would say too, like, I know people who have been in those positions in life at times, and I think when they find themselves in a better space, it usually leads somewhere in that journey. God has been inserted, right? So it's there, and whatever, some may call it God, some may call it whatever, right? But I think that when people find themselves there, a lot of times, not every time, but a lot of times they find themselves connected to God on some level, right? And so there's a ton of hope to be had, but I'm a believer in the hope. We talk about that a lot in this podcast. Nobody's lost, forever, for good. Change can always come about. So that's why I choose to beat that drum.
I think one of the words that you touched on it a little bit, Mike, but one of the words that really means a lot to me is the word perspective. Because I think that it's very easy for us sometimes to only see kind of this limited view of what's right in front of your face. And sometimes you have to be able to step back. One of the phrases I really like is, when you're, life is full of, mountains and valleys, right? Sometimes you're riding high and things are going great and you're up on top of the mountain and you can see, everything, and you can see like this great path laid in front of you. You can see where things are going. You got this great view and everything's hunky dory. And then as you move forward, sometimes you find yourself down in this valley where things aren't going the way you wanted. Maybe your path got blocked, or maybe things, you had to deviate your course. And when you're down in that valley, it's hard to see outside those walls, right? It's hard to see up that view again of where you were. And so I think sometimes having, when you are having difficulties and struggles and trials, I think sometimes you have to be able to put yourself back on top of that mountain and say, wait a sec, there are good things on the horizon. There are good things coming. I just need to get up out of this little rut that I'm in so I can see that. And like you said, sometimes it's that incremental change. Sometimes it's those little steps that will take you, to the next place and to the next place until you're back up to where you want to be and you can see things. But when you're in that valley and life's going not the way you wanted to, it can be really hard to take that step back and try to see the good and try to see the silver linings in some of those things. I see that all the time. I have, leadership positions in a couple different areas of my life right now. And there's plenty of mistakes that I make as a leader. And there's things that I go back and I wish I could do differently. And sometimes you get in that rut of, man, I really screwed up that interaction, or I really could have, I could have handled this situation differently. But then, trying to step back and say, you know what, this is going to be a learning experience for me. And next time something like this happens, I know how to handle it a little bit better and start seeing maybe the good in some of those negative things that happen. But I love that word perspective. I just love the concept of, being able to see, the bigger picture. Why are we here? What is the purpose of this life? What are we trying to do? And what are we trying to accomplish? Oftentimes when I'm having some bad days, taking that step back and trying to get my view back on top of that mountain a little bit really makes a big difference in keeping me in check and being able to move forward.
I think that's a necessary life skill. You know what I mean? Like, good or bad, right? When you're in a bad spot, you want to be able to step back and be like, okay, let me take a breath, assess what I'm doing, take a look around me and see what the reality of the situation is. But I think when you're succeeding, I think the same skill applies, right? Like, step back. Let me see where I'm at, what I've done, how I got here. I think that's just a skill. I love that you brought that up, Chris, because I think that's a life skill that allows for change, right? Because I've been in those moments where I'm like, okay, this is something real crappy's happening. I'm just going to put my head down and shoulder and push through this thing, right? And it just becomes this miserable grind. And not saying if you step back and look at the whole thing, it's not going to be a miserable grind, but at least you have a better understanding of what this really is, right? And I think that perspective changes everything. So I
think
agree.
that there's a cool, as you're talking, Tyler, I think that there's a cool interplay there, right? Like when you're down, memory of highs, memory of mountaintops,
100%. Yeah.
perpetuate your efforts to go get another one, right? When you're on top, that zooming out and be like, hey, let's enjoy this. Because of what you just went through.
Exactly. Yeah.
And
exactly.
B, it won't always be like this. So we talk about those rich moments. It's like, can we just look around right now and acknowledge the work, the grace, right? The tender mercies that led us to this.
Yeah.
And then when we're in the deep, can we step back, gain that perspective and say, can we acknowledge that this is a season and there will be sunny days again? Because there have been, right? Like the great Coach Wooden from UCLA puts it all down. All of his success is tied to the word love and balance. Tyler and I push back on that balance and say Wooden doesn't know what he's talking about. I'll put down Wooden's balance and I'll pick up Chris Smyrnos' perspective. Because he does say, right after he says the word balance, he says keeping things in perspective. And if that's what he means by balance, I can get behind that, right?
And here's a cool thing too. I think that if you find yourself in a position where you are unable to step back and find perspective, it's good to have someone who can give you some perspective, right? Like to have someone who says, hey, it's gonna get better, right?
But the last thing that's counterintuitive, because the last thing you want to do is go find someone. Right?
100%.
You want to close the door, turn the lights off, nobody home, and just get buried. Right.
And this is why I go with that Brian, when we had Brian Bunker on the podcast and he talked about being palms up. I talk to my kids about that all the time that are out of the house. It's like, let's be open, right? Let's approach the world with our arms open, bringing people in and not have this closed off stance where we're just like, I'm miserable, I'm going to do it by myself, right? And that's hard. You're right. It's super counterintuitive. There's times where people are like, Tyler, you need to, it's not that bad. And I just want to be like, shut up. It is bad, right? Like you don't get it, but I think that it's counterintuitive, but I think having someone who can say to you, hey, things will get better is a big deal too, right? It sort of forces you to reassess some things. So,
and why not be that person too?
100%.
I think there's, why not be that person that is in tune enough with the people that you care about and the people around you to be like, hey, you look like you're having a bad day, or what's going on? What can we do?
Yeah.
It's so easy, and again, it's like with my career, it's hard sometimes because you do get jaded. You get jaded into this sense of everybody out there is, because all we deal with is problems all day, and everybody, hates the cops, and everybody wants to go, do drugs or steal things or whatever the thing is, and now the context for me is even a little bit different because, I'm in, I have some leadership roles and some management positions. So I deal with people, my employees often. And that has its own, unique challenges. And I care deeply about the people that I work with, but there's still, you still have to hold people accountable, and there's just so many like different angles in it. But if you can be that person that is, trying to build people up and trying to make people better, when they're at their worst, then maybe that person's going to, maybe when you're down, they're going to recognize what you did for them and they're going to come do that for you. And so it's kind of like that gift that keeps on giving. But it can be hard.
That to me is the key. Like when Tyler uses compassion, that's intentional. We've learned on this by talking to folks, on the podcast and talking to people about what makes that rich life. Rich lives are filled with compassion because compassion is doing something about it.
Yeah.
Right. We're not just feeling something. We're doing something about the things that we feel.
It's intentional. It has to be intentional.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I love it, man. I think, I mean, I can't imagine. I mean, it's different, right? I mean, being a police officer because you're faced with it every day, versus just kind of dealing with your own thing or with your kids or just employees or people in general. But being inundated, how do you battle the not being just totally jaded? Like, I could see where that would be like, you know what, look, I'm writing this off, man. Everybody's whatever. People can't get their crap together, so forget it. You know what I mean?
Other people's problems.
That's
Other
right.
people's problems. I like, for me, and I think it takes a very, it takes a very specific type of person to be an effective police officer or a firefighter or a 911 dispatcher. And I don't mean this in any sort of condescending way, but those are just not jobs for everybody. You have to be able to, you see things and the things that you deal with. I mean, like, you deal with, death, and you deal with abuse, and you deal with drugs, and you deal with, just these things that are just, like I said, I was very fortunate growing up. I wasn't surrounded by those things, as a kid, but that's the world that you live in. And so, like, for me, I've always had the ability to really, like, bifurcate things in my head. So things that I see and things that happen at work, I've always been really good at not taking those home, in the sense that, like, I don't, like, bottle it up and, like, and let it get to me. And I try to have productive outlets. I mean, I used to smoke Tyler all the time at racquetball. I have things that I like to do. Sometimes it's even simple, like
look at him running his mouth. Look at him talking the trash.
Hey,
I would
I'm
argue
on a
that
road here.
point.
Don't interrupt me. We'll come back to that. But no, it's sometimes you have to have, and so, like, for me, and I think a lot of, I think where officers and firefighters and dispatchers and people in that industry get in trouble is when they don't have, like, a productive outlet. They don't have, everything becomes about their job and their work. All their friends are coworkers, and it's not, it's great. You need to have friends in the business. It really is a brotherhood and a sisterhood. And I've been through fire and brimstone, with my coworkers on different things. And, but you need to have friends that are outside of the business. You need to have, like, for me, like, my, my service in my church is really, really important for me, because I surround myself with men and women that have nothing to do with law enforcement, that are, tax paying, good decision making, moral, ethical, sometimes most of the time, except for that that Freeman guy. He's a little sketch.
Right, yeah.
But you have to, you have to surround yourself with people to help keep you grounded, and you have to have positive outlets. Like, sometimes it can be simple, like, just taking my wife and going, for a walk through the neighborhood with the dog or something like that. That, for me, is just an incredibly, like, centering and grounding experience, because it gets me outside, get some fresh air. I can talk to my spouse about, whatever's going on that day, let the dog, run and play. And it brings me back from the negativity and the downside. And so I think that, I think it comes back to choice. So I think I have a choice as to how I deal with those things. I can choose to get to me, or I can choose to have some productive, outlets for it. And when I see cops that have difficulties and they fail, they turn to things like alcohol. They turn to things like, adultery. They turn to things like, all their friends, they eat, breathe, and sleep, police. They watch cop shows on their time off and all these other things. And you got to step away. You got to step away and have your own identity. My identity is, I'm a husband, I'm a father, I'm a leader in my church, and I'm a police officer. It's not, I'm a police officer and I do these other things. My identity is centered on all these different aspects of my life. And you just have to really, again, perspective. You got to keep that perspective of, what's really important. I've seen, families, law enforcement families fall apart because people could not, they had a hard time balancing the stress of the job with everything else that they're trying to accomplish.
Yeah, we were talking about this idea.
Why I love Chris, though, right?
Yeah,
it's like laying it down, and I love the idea of identity, and we talk about that a lot. It's especially, we've talked about it in the context of knowing who we are on an eternal perspective. But I think if we take that down to just what makes us who we are, like, how do we identify ourselves? I love that list is husband, father, right? You have all these other things, and then a police officer, and you're still a great police officer. That's, you know what I mean? Like, you're not sacrificing because you're putting some of these things first.
Did you want to have any?
I would make an argument it enhances it. Sorry, Mike.
Did you want to have any rebuttal about the racquetball?
I didn't argue in the first place because it was pretty accurate.
If I remember right, we were actually pretty evenly matched. I think
we were pretty evenly matched. Yeah,
I think it kind of came out that we for every one that I won, maybe like 3/4 of a game Tyler would win. So it was it was pretty close. It was pretty close.
It was pretty close.
I can't believe I'm going to say this, but in my work right now, we are talking about a commitment to excellence. Has nothing to do with Al Davis. Has nothing to do with
baby. Let's go. Come on. The autumn win was a Raider. Here we go.
One of the foundational principles that we're talking to our people about is a commitment to excellence and defining excellence. And some of the conversations that we're having are exactly what Chris just pointed out. And I think it's a foundation belief of folks that we talk to on the Richest Men in Town, is that personal excellence cannot be sacrificed in our quest for any type of professional excellence. That actually, if we're looking to be excellent in other roles of our lives, it has to come from a core of a forged character of excellence. And that excellence is tested and tried over time with decisions and choices. And as we do those things, that excellence will happen. The score will take care of itself, right? And I think it's just important that we get that right, because if you don't get that right, we're gonna be in a world of hurt, right? I'm all in on Deion Sanders and what he's doing in Colorado. All in on that guy. I've heard him talk about his faith journey, and it's an interesting story, right? He shares that, look, I had 500 pairs of shoes and I didn't know my next step. I had 20 cars and I didn't know where I was going. 15,000 square foot house and I didn't have a home, right? Because he didn't look for the personal character. He didn't look for the personal excellence, and things started crumbling around him. And then he turned to faith, right? And then he started working and rebuilding from the ground up as a person who's trying to find who God is, right? And he talks about God calling collect and being afraid to pick up the phone because he knows the mess that he's in, right? And he knows the work that it's going to take to clean it up. But just a cool story. But I love what Chris was saying. And I can tell you, as I'm hanging out with Chris in this call, it's like, I want to be better, right? I want to be better. I think hopefully too, Mike, we'll all do that.
That idea of, as you're talking, Mike, I'm just thinking, you brought up John Wooden and his comments about balance. And, and I have said, probably on the record, and maybe, I'm inaccurate, but I said, balance is a myth. But I do think that there is this, I think in my mind, I've felt like balance meant equal, right? And I don't think that that's necessarily the case. I think balance is just the ability to hold many things, right? And sometimes we prioritize
Chris's roles, right? Like Chris's role.
Absolutely right. Exactly right. So I think that in that sense, balance is attainable, right? Balance is not attainable. Balance is the key, right? We need to be a husband. We need to be a father. We need to be an employee. We need to be a manager. We need to be all these things. But it's possible. But I think that when we have the things in the right order, things start to fall into place a little easier.
So I'm going to take that one step further on that balance comment. And I think balance is about questions. I think balance is asking the question, what is important to you?
Yeah.
And then coming up with some priorities. One thing that I find is if I try to do, I have I like being busy, right? I like having projects and things to work on. I'm not one of those people that can just kind of sit around and do nothing. But I find that if I try to take on too many things, then everything starts to suffer. I become, rather than being good or great at a small, these core things, I try to do too many things, and I find, everything just becomes mediocre or falls through the cracks or whatever. And so I think balance is asking yourself the question, what is important to you? What are your priorities? And having an honest conversation with yourself about setting those and saying, again, being a husband, that's a big one of mine, dedicating, time to just my wife, trying to spend time just by ourselves, going on date nights, talking to my kids, my 17-year-old, she loves to drive a car, kind of like her dad. And almost every couple nights she'll come to me and she'll go, "Hey Dad, let's go for a drive." And I will drop what I'm doing and I'm going to go sit in that car and we're going to go drive around, and we just drive up nowhere. We drive nowhere, but we talk. Sometimes we don't. Sometimes we sit in silence, but it's just spending that time, with my kids, talking to them when they're having difficulties, but making choices because
it helps when it's a Tesla, Tyler. It helps when it's a Tesla.
It does. It does a little bit. Yeah. Not gonna lie.
A little bit.
But I could be choosing to, I got to slow emails for work I gotta do, sitting at my kitchen table on my time off. I could be choosing to, I want to watch the latest and greatest, TV show or whatever else. And so I think that balance for me comes down to asking yourself questions, what's important, and then making choices as to what you're going to prioritize in your life.
But I think the key that you just drilled in on is when you ask that question, I wrote it down, right? Honest conversation with yourself regarding the answers.
Yeah.
Yep. And I'll be honest with myself right here and with you guys. I struggle with that because there's what I want to do or what I want to be, but like, what am I doing right now is incongruent with what I want to be and what I want to be doing. And if I'm not honest about that gap, we got a problem.
Well, I think too, Chris talks about prioritizing and making choices. I immediately am thinking about removing debris from our lives, right? And it's so easy to Mike, you and I were talking about this. We took a month off on the podcast recently because our kids were getting ready to go on missions. And the podcast is a commitment, right? It's time. It's throughout the week. We spend a lot of time working on this. And in that month, I found lots of things to fill that time, right? And some of them were good and some of them were just crappy filler, you know what I mean? So there really is. And I think that honest conversation, that self-assessment is key, right? To be able to sit back and say, all right, what's the most important thing? Who are the most important people? And what am I, and the things that I'm currently doing, does that match up with those things? Right.
Yeah. There has to be asking the question is the first step, but there has to be some action behind it. You got to do something. You got to ask the question and then you got to say, right, cool. Now what am I going to do to make good on what I need to do?
Yeah. What is almost like, what is important right now? And what am I doing right now? And check yourself and make a change. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, can we get into some of this growing up, right? You mentioned a little bit about your background and your family and growing up, but before we do that, it would be remiss for folks that are in struggles, right? For folks that do have some things going on. We've mentioned some of the things that Chris sees on a daily basis, and I just love this quote. This quote's on my phone right now. Many individuals look at their current family circumstances and wonder how they will be able to receive the blessings that are promised to families sometimes. God, your Heavenly Father, is aware of your concerns, and He knows and loves your family. All families face challenges, and none are perfect, but the gospel of Jesus Christ can heal and help each of us. As families faithfully strive to live the gospel, they can resolve misunderstandings, contentions, and challenges. All of the imperfections and injustices of this life can be overcome through the atonement of Jesus Christ. So when we think about choice, when we think about those things, it's really hard to do it alone. As we exercise choice and agency and line that up with faith, now we're cooking with gas and we can have those small wins lead to big wins.
There's a scripture that I come back to quite a bit. I think you guys know exactly where I'm going with this, but it's one that it's carried me through a lot of difficult moments in my life. And it's one that I share with people because I have conversations with people all the time about difficulties, and I love it. It's found in the Book of Mormon. It's 1 Nephi chapter 3, verse 7. And it says, and it came to pass that I, Nephi, said unto my father, I will go and do the things which the Lord hath commanded, for I know that the Lord giveth no commandments unto the children of men, save you shall prepare a way for them, that they may accomplish the thing which he commandeth them. And the way that I distill that down is that I will never, ever have anything put on my plate that I'm not able to handle. Sometimes in the moment, it's hard to, again, you're in that valley and it's hard to see out the other side of the mountain and go, Lord, I don't understand why I'm dealing with this right now. I don't understand the way out. But oftentimes when you get out on the other side and you turn around and you look back at that valley you were in, you get to see, oh, okay, that's why I did that. That's why I had that setback. That's why that difficult thing happened to me, because I needed to learn a lesson, or I needed to figure out this principle or make this decision. And I always come back to that. So I love that concept of, making choices, but also knowing that, we are being supported in, when we're making good choices, we have some pretty powerful allies on our side with it.
Yeah,
that one's near and dear.
Prepared. Yeah.
That verse is near and dear to me. My boy on his last email shared that. Like that idea, like I will go, I will do, for I know. I think that's a powerful thing, right? And it's sometimes you need outside people to remind you of that, because sometimes it does seem insurmountable. Like, that sounds really cute, Chris, but like, you don't know my situation. You know what? God knows all the situations.
But I think Mike, that goes to back to that point of like, if we can get to a place where we are able to step back and change our perspective, that's powerful. But if we're not, surround ourselves with people that are willing to help us there, right? I have this conversation with my youngest daughter all the time. It's like, she gets frustrated with homework and she's up in her room and I hear the frustration sometimes. So I walk in and and it's like, what's going on? And she's like super frustrated. And I said, when you start to get frustrated, just open the door and call for me and I'll come up and we'll help. We can knock this out together. Right. So it's tough sometimes for people to do that. But I think that it's not a weakness. It's a power if we're willing to reach out and ask somebody.
Yeah. So Chris, you didn't wake up like the guy you are right now. So let's get into this process a little bit. Let's talk about growing up, right? Paint a picture for me, right? What does growing up look like? We love George Bailey. We love his story, right? It's a Wonderful Life, and it starts on a frozen pond. Talk to me about Chris Smyrnos when he's 12, right? Where are we at? What does growing up look like?
So I was born in the Bay Area, but my parents had the sense to get out of there when I was, I think, about second or third grade. So most of my core memories come from this little small town called Grass Valley. Grass Valley, Nevada City. That's where I grew up. That's where I say I grew up. And as a kid, I loved being outside. I loved riding my bike. We had some really nice trails and rivers. It's a great, super small town. The biggest store in town was Kmart, and I was proud to work there. And I was the cart boy. I was I got on the microphone from time to time and did the old blue light specials. Remember those?
Okay, so point of clarification for our younger audience: Kmart was a large store similar to your Target, which is no longer in business.
Well, and right? Blue Light Special was a marketing genius.
Oh yeah,
it was. We would grab we'd go back to the back and find a box full of junk that we needed to get rid of, and we'd wheel it out front. We had this little cart that had a flashing blue light, and you get on the PA. Attention, Kmart shoppers! There's a Blue Light Special on men's socks 4-pack, 99 cents, and then everybody come running up, grab all their socks, and off they go. So yeah. It was a good time. Time.
Last week we talked Pro Wings. Pro Wings were probably available at Payless Shoe Source and maybe Kmart.
Yeah, Payless and Kmart were, I think, probably got their shoes from the same factory or two.
Yeah. And did you have slush puppies at Kmart?
Oh yeah.
We had a Little Caesars pizza station, actually. That was pretty awesome.
Oh, nice.
Back in the pizza days, or what?
That's deluxe.
Back in the pizza days. Oh,
yeah.
Yeah. It was a good time. So
no, right, sorry, we digress.
Let's get back on. Yeah. No, so I had a really good childhood. My dad actually was he was a prosecutor. So he was a lawyer, but he worked for like the government, and he worked to put bad people in jail. And so I kind of was around cops. A lot of my dad's friends were police officers that he'd worked cases with and all that. And so I kind of had this affinity for law enforcement. And at the time, I was a really, really nosy person. I just always want to know what was going on. You hear like a fire truck or police car go whizzing by with their lights on. I'm like, where are they going? I want to know what they're doing. And so that kind of like was the little spark for me that got me interested, kind of going down the law enforcement road. And then in my early 20s, I actually picked up a job as the 911 dispatcher for the local sheriff's office there. And so that was kind of neat. So I got to have the experience of answering emergency calls and sending the cops places. But for me, I wanted to be on the other side of the radio. I wanted to be out there doing the work. And that's kind of what pushed me, towards going to the police academy in my career.
Siblings?
I have one sister. She's younger. She's actually, so it's kind of funny. So I'm actually the black sheep in my family by being a police officer, because my dad's a lawyer and my sister's also an attorney. She's an immigration attorney out in Virginia.
You guys got the law and order on.
We got the law. Yeah, that's right. So no, so she's got 2 kids and lives out in Virginia, out in the Roanoke area right now.
Well, what I love about Chris, Tyler, is that faith journey. So talk to me a little bit about what that faith journey looked like. Yeah, did you grow up a member of a church? Did you have a faith tradition? Talk to me a little bit about that process, and because I think it's weaved into maybe even how you meet your wife, right?
It is, and so I know you guys like to talk about hinges.
Let's go.
So this is a big one for me. So all right, so growing up, my parents were they're identify as Christian, and they we'd go to church. I actually remember sitting down and reading the Bible with my dad as I was a kid, but it never really clicked for me. I'd read the scriptures and I would appreciate some of the things that were said, but I just kind of was like, okay, that's just something people, whatever. It just never really clicked with me. And then so my wife is actually technically my ex-girlfriend, although I don't think she likes it when I call her that.
So my wife is my ex-girlfriend. Yeah, that wouldn't go over very well.
Technically. Well, truth be told, so we grew up together. We've known each other since like 4th grade. We had kind of the same friend circles growing up. I don't know if she'll admit it, but I think she had a pretty good crush on me back in 8th grade, but that's, for a different conversation. So we actually, so my wife actually grew up a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And she, so she was exposed to, that kind of that learning lessons and the gospel truths and the Book of Mormon and those sorts of things. And so that was, she was one of the Mormons and I was not. But I always thought she was pretty darn good looking. So, the summer after high school, we actually dated for a little bit. So again, because like I said, we had the same friend circle, we were hanging out a lot, and it's kind of like, so you like me? I kind of like you. And all right, well, so it was kind of a thing. So we dated for that summer. She ended up going off to, she went down to college down in San Luis Obispo. I stayed in town and we kind of went our separate ways. It wasn't like, a bad breakup or anything like that, but it's just, life kind of took us down some different paths. And so, and I stayed in town. That's about the time I was working as a dispatcher, going to the police academy, kind of have my little trajectory of where I wanted to go. And, again, kind of talking about hinges. So about 3 years after my wife and I, we kind of went our separate ways, I was driving down the road. I think I was heading to the store or the gym or something like that. And I saw my wife walking down the side of the road. And I looked over and I'm like, oh, that's Julie. I know her. And I wonder if she's single. I'm single right now. Man, she still looks good. So I made the decision in that moment to pull over and go say hi. Like I said, it wasn't, we didn't break up on bad terms. We were still friends. We still communicated somewhat, when she was gone. And that moment was probably the single biggest hinge, if you will, for me, because I kind of did the, hey, look at me, I'm heading to the gym in my cool car. You want to hang out? Thinking I'm like some smooth Casanova, and she's like rolling her eyes. But she was like, yeah, sure, why not? So she hopped in and I drove her, wherever she was going. And that kind of got us back in touch. And I remember as I started spending more and more time with her, I was like, I started getting really into her again. And so, but as life happened, she ended up having to go back to college down in San Luis Obispo. But I wanted to,
true story. She's a rocket scientist, right?
Yeah.
yeah, she went to Cal Poly for aerospace engineering. So she's definitely the smart one in our little pair here. So yeah. So anyway, so she went back to school. But we stayed in touch. I ended up going down to visit her, and one thing led to another, and we basically got back together. And I remember, kind of bringing this back home to the faith side of it. I had actually, I was going to school at Cal State Long Beach for a bit, working on my criminal justice degree. And through her college, she was actually doing an internship out on the East Coast for NASA. So we're kind of doing like the long distance, thing for a while. And I remember there was a specific period of time. It was in October of 2001. And I just had a lot of things going on in my life. I had some student loans. The paperwork got messed up. So something didn't happen right. And I didn't get the money that I needed was being delayed. I had midterms. I had just a lot of stresses. My first time really being away from home. And I remember talking to her, and because she always seemed to just have everything together. She was just cool as a cucumber, and nothing seemed to phase her. And I remember talking to her, and I said, how do you deal with things when life gets rough, when things are going crazy? How do you deal with things? And her response to me was that she said, you know what? I get down on my knees and I pray, and I seek the guidance of my Heavenly Father. And, and I knew she was LDS, and, that was definitely, on my mind in the relationship. She was never one to like be pushy, like, well, you got to go to church if you want to be with me, nothing like that. But I remember that conversation, and I remember like this kind of idea of, you know what, I'm going to give this a shot. It works for her. You know what, I'm actually going to do this. I'm going to do this the right way. And so I remember getting down on my knees, and I said probably the first like real sincere prayer. Here I am, 19, 20, however many years old, in a dorm room at Cal State Long Beach, on my knees, praying to my Heavenly Father to like, what do I do? Life is just crazy nuts right now, and I can't deal with this. And I remember very distinctly a physical feeling of a weight being lifted off my shoulders, and this kind of like feeling that everything was going to be okay. And it wasn't like I didn't hear the words, you know what I mean? I didn't hear like a voice from the clouds saying anything. It was just this peace and this feeling that everything was going to be okay. And at that moment, I knew I knew I knew that I needed to know more, and that there was something to this. And so I remember there was an institute at our school at Long Beach. And so I went down to the institute, and I walked inside, and I said, hey, I want to learn more about this church. I want to learn more about what you guys do. And so, of course, the missionaries were like, "Oh yeah, great, this is awesome," and so I took back then the discussions that they had and everything else, and I still remember the day I got baptized down in LA in Long Beach, and I invited a bunch of my friends that were living in the area, and it was just one of the happiest days of my life. And then, and I know how happy that made my wife, girlfriend, whatever at the time. And from there, it just went from there. I was all in. I was all in with the church. I was all in with, there's a singles ward down there. We do break the fast on Sundays. I'd go out with the missionaries, and it's just because I never served a mission. I was kind of a little bit older at that point, and I was all in. And so we ended up, I remember she was back in LA, and there's the LA Temple is right on Sunset Boulevard, and it's this big building sticking right out, in the middle of this busy city. And we were there at Christmas time, and the grounds of the temple were all just like beautiful and Christmas lights and all that. And I remember as we were walking around those temple grounds, I said to myself, like, I know this is who I'm supposed to spend the rest of my life with. So I proposed to her at the LA Temple. We ended up getting married in in the Reno Temple, about a year later. And it's, that's how I got into it. That's kind of the origin story.
Was your plan to propose that night?
I No, because I didn't have a ring. I didn't have any of that
I
stuff.
love that. Honestly,
Yeah.
I
Come
love
on.
that.
That
It's
is
just
so
like,
great because now there's such a
yeah.
production, right?
You just, yeah, like you got
Love it.
photographers and
Yeah,
I
you
just
got
love
like
I love the idea of just feeling it and saying, "Shoot, I know this is the person.
Shoot your shot.
Yeah,
let's go. I shot my shot, and here we are. And it's and I'll be honest, like there's been times where through my years of membership in the church and growth, where I've had my ups and downs. I've had the peaks and the valleys, and I've had some pretty major trials and struggles at different points. But I always look back, and when I'm struggling with something or when things are hard, um, I always think back to that moment, on my knees in my dorm room and how that felt. I had a blessing not too long ago by a good friend of mine who I might be talking to right now. And one of the things that he said in that blessing, it was for a church position that I now hold, was remember this feeling. Remember this feeling. Remember how this feels, because it was such a spiritual moment for me. And so, I love that phrase because when life gets rough or things are kind of, I'm wavering in my faith or my commitments, I remember back to, like I said, that night in the dorm room when I prayed and how I felt. And there's no way I can deny it. Through all the ups and downs, I come back to that. And that's just you talk about hinges pulling over when I saw a cute girl walking down the street. And then that night in my dorm room were definitely some big hinges in my life.
Come on.
Remember
right?
is an eternal principle, right? I mean, that's it. That's it, man. There's a reason why throughout the scriptures, it's that word is used hundreds of times, because that's how we march through those valleys. That's amazing, man. I thank you for
cast your
that.
night or cast your mind on the night you called to me, right?
Yep.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I love that. Hey, so seasons change, right? So when you're a young man and you get baptized, you have this all-in feeling. I'm going to steal a page out of Morgan Jones' playbook. Actually, she got married. Her last name's something different, but the All-In podcast ends her episodes with what does it mean for you to be all in? So, Chris, now in life, when you say the phrase all in, what does that look like to be all in the gospel?
So I think, even, gospel or outside, I think what that means is that you just have to care. I have a lot of leadership conversations, with people that I work with and in other contexts. And at its core, you just have to care. You have to care about the people that are around you. You have to care about what you do, because if you care, like if you truly care, I try really hard, like in my job right now, I try hard to make things better. With the calling that I have in church, my job is to help support my bishop. And I care about him and I care about what his mission is and the burden that he has on his plate. And I try to lighten his load as much as I can. You just have to care, because if you truly care at that foundational level, other things will naturally fall into place, because you're going to want to be a better husband. You're going to want to be a better father, son, brother, sister, daughter, church member. You're going to want to be a better, police officer or lieutenant or whatever's in your charge. And so, like, for me, stripping it away, you just have to care. You have to have that passion to care about those things that are important to you. And so for me, that phrase all in means that I am caring about the things that are important to me. And out of that emotion of that action of caring is, actual action and showing people that I care in my conversations with them, in my interactions and so forth. And so, and I'm like I said, I'm far from perfect at that.
But I think the people that I know that know you, if I were to ask them, that's what they'd say. Chris cares.
Yeah, 100%.
Right? I think that Chris cares about making things better, and I think that people feel that.
And that's the core of who you are, Chris. I mean, from the first time I met you, that's the feeling I've had from you.
Well, we had a guest on the podcast that taught us about hope, and the opposite of hope isn't despair; it's actually apathy, which is not caring.
Yeah.
Apathy is that belief that nothing I do matters, so why care? Right, and that's the gravitational pull on every person that is alive right now. Right, there's a pull towards that, and we got to fight that.
And it can be hard. It can be hard when you're down in those valleys, to to care. I mean, it can be hard to see like why, like you said, to have apathy comes easily at times, at least it does for me.
Well, it's the
And so I
path of
have to
least
be,
resistance, right?
oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's easy. It's easy to know. I don't care about that. That's not my problem. I'm not going to worry about that. But I think that, one of the things that I think is really important when it comes to this concept of that foundational, that piece of caring is this idea of, like I talk a lot about leadership, and I talk a lot about, how to be a good leader and coaching and mentoring, those different things. And I think that one of the traps I found myself in sometimes is this idea that, the, this leadership and this caring and being a leader within your home or your work or whatever, it's not a place that you get to. You don't wake up one day and say to yourself, oh man, I'm just a great leader. I got all this leadership stuff figured out. It has to be a process. It has to be like lifelong learning and a journey. And again, if you really truly care about being a better person, then you will learn from your mistakes. You will have humility to admit when you make mistakes. You'll be able to step back and go, yeah, that interaction I had last week, yeah, I really screwed that up. But next time it happens, I'm going to be better about it. I'm not going to, I'm not going to let that happen. And so there has to be, when you caring about others is really great, but you have to care about yourself too. You have to care about yourself enough to recognize, what do I need to do to be a better person? What do I need to do to be a better, all the important things, husband, father, all of that list that we talked about. And so like, coming back to that all in is just, you have to have that passion. You have to have that drive, and you just have to care. You just have to give a crap about, about where you're at in your life and the things that are important to you. And if you do truly, all those other pieces, tend to reveal themselves.
I love the thought of going through life looking for the chance to looking for the chance to do it right the next time. Right? Like we mess this thing up. I've gone back and I've made it right, and I've promised the people, I've looked people in the eyes, and I've told them the next time I'm given this chance, I'm not going to make this mistake again. And I love that thought of like, I'm going to go day to day, and when that opportunity presents itself, I'm going to recognize it, remember the promise, and step into that space different. Right? That's the beauty of life, right? And maybe you crush it, and maybe you're right back flat on your back, and it takes you a couple times to figure it out, right? But I think that's the fight worth fighting.
I like that principle of caring. To me, there's like this idea of passion that's tied to that as well. And I think that because it's not always easy, it's not always easy to care, but I think that if we're in that mindset, I love that. I think it pushes you to a different space, so that's awesome.
I find one of the things that really helps keep me grounded with all of that. I love serving others, and I think there is so much joy and happiness in providing service to others. I mean, with my responsibilities I have in church right now, with my career has been around, it has revolved around serving other people. That's the job that I chose for myself, way back when. And, when I don't know, I have never had a time in my life where I'm having a horrible day and somebody needs some help and I go help them out. And I'm like, man, I really wish I wouldn't have done that. That made me feel worse.
Right.
I was having a pretty rough day a week or two ago, and I got a phone call from somebody I know through church, and he said, hey, it was actually a wife, and she said, my husband's in the hospital, he's really sick right now, and he could really use some company, he could really use the blessing. And so me and another gentleman that I know ended up going up to the hospital to provide that service. And it's kind of like that my initial statement on the floor of my dorm room, that kind of that weight got lifted off my shoulders, at least for a little bit. It came back because it's some things I had to deal with. But when you're in that moment, when you're providing that service to somebody, it takes you back and helps keep you grounded, helps give you that perspective again. And it helps you remember the things that I'm grateful for. I'm in my mid-40s, so if I sleep funny, I wake up and my back hurts now, and the days of smoking Tyler racquetball are probably behind me. But
So,
it's just like I'm grateful for for what I do have, and it helps me see that.
so one thing that I've noticed is it's a family trait. You guys are Freemans are last to show, first to go. Right? When there's something going on, we'll show up right when it's like, oh, cool, you guys are just cleaning up. Awesome. We'll help you out and then we'll get out of here. Smyrnos are first one to show up, last one to leave. Like, where does that come?
Sometimes.
Where
Sometimes.
it's been noticed? Where does that come from?
Um, I, with the responsibility, the calling that I have in church right now, I'm there early and I have to stay late anyways. But I think it's just like I don't know, and I'm not trying to sound, I don't want this to be like sounding conceited or anything else. But like I said, I enjoy providing service. I enjoy helping others because it helps me. It's just the feeling that you get when you're serving other people. You just and their reaction, their response. And sometimes you provide service and people aren't grateful for it, but you still provided it, And so I like being somebody that can be relied upon. I like kind of being like the go-to guy sometimes. Like, hey, if Mike Freeman's having a bad day and he needs somebody to talk to, maybe I'm on your list. Maybe I'm on your list of people to check in with because, that I'm going to be there for you or Tyler or whoever, And I just I think
I love
that, and I
I
yeah, and I
love
try
the
to
idea. I love
yeah,
the
and
idea of being a go-to guy, right? I think the other
yeah,
day I heard somebody described as fearless. I'm like, oh man, I like that too, right?
yeah.
Like, oh man, so and so is fearless. I think go-to guy and fearless are some pretty cool descriptions of people, especially when we think about who we're trying to emulate, right? Like when we go to church and we talk about serving in church and we talk about these are all things that we're doing in our journey as disciples of Jesus Christ. And how great would it be if we become like him in the process of this service? Right? I can't
And
think of a more
I think
go-to
that's I think
guy.
that's the point.
Yeah, I don't think
I
I,
think
I
that's the
can't
point.
think of a more go-to guy than the master, right?
Yeah,
Who's always there. There is no bottom. There is no place we can go to hide from his love. And I think it's just kind of cool that I hang out with Chris Smyrnos and I see the way you're doing things, and I'm thinking, yeah, he's a go-to guy.
yeah, and I like to like one of the things that's important for me too is my wife and I when our kids were really little we'd talk about we have these conversations about how like raising kids. I mean that's a challenge, right? I mean that's a hard job if any. And so you can't teach your kids every single scenario they're going to come across. You can't teach them, okay, if this happens, you do this. If that happens, you do that. Every single right and wrong. But you can teach them to make good choices. And so when they're faced with a unfamiliar situation, hopefully you've given them the foundation to make that good choice. And so I try to model that behavior so my kids see me arriving early, my kids see me leaving late, and they, hopefully look up to me and say, you know what? That's how I want to be someday. I look, my father is a huge role model for me, and he's somebody that I care deeply for. He was actually, they live in Virginia near my sister. My dad was in town here the other day, so he came up and we hung out for a bit. And I look up to him, and I think I pattern a lot of my behaviors off what I saw him doing, and so I just I do it partly for myself, I do it for other people, and I do it because I want my family and the people that are important to me seeing that's the way you're supposed to act. That's what you should be doing.
So you married Julie, right? Your story picks up. You married Julie, and some kids come out. Give me shout out the names here. Let's make sure we represent them and
so
famous
yeah.
as this thing goes viral.
So Allison's my oldest. She's 17 and a half. She's a senior. My son Ian is 14. He's a freshman. And then my youngest, her name's Marissa, and she's 13, and she's an eighth grader. They all go to the same school here in town.
And you shared what you're hoping they're learning from you. What are they teaching you?
Let's see. I think patience is probably a big one. I think it's probably pretty universal with kids. No, they're teaching me what it means to be like what it means to be good human beings. My wife and I kind of joke because my oldest, like I said, her and I, she just likes to, she'll literally dangle her keys like, Dad, let's go for a drive. And she just likes spending time with me. And, she's at that age where she's just a neat human being to be around. We were actually driving last night and I was kind of venting to her about some difficulties that I was having to work. And so being able to talk to like my daughter, who I held like in one hand, when she was a baby, and now she's this human being that's talking about, going to college. She's talking about serving a mission for her church. She's talking about surrounding herself with people that are like-minded and that make the similar choices to her. And it just makes me think like, maybe all the sleepless nights, all the hard work, all the ups and downs, mountains and valleys of being a parent have paid off. And I'm not just trying to single her out. My other kids are awesome too. But it's just neat to see my kids succeeding. And sometimes, they have their failures. They have their moments where life isn't going according to plan or isn't going the way that they want. And so trying to help guide them and help them navigate, through that road. One of the conversations I had with my youngest the other day. So there's a gentleman named Viktor Frankl. I'm sure you guys are both familiar with him. There's a book that he wrote called Man's Search for Meaning. I read it through some leadership training I did. And I love that book so much because I love the idea and the concept of, one of the things that nobody can ever take away from you is your ability to choose. And this is a guy who's in a concentration camp and his family and friends are like literally dying around him. And I couldn't even fathom what that's like. And yet he maintained this attitude of, the Nazis can take lots of stuff from me, but they can't take away my ability to choose for myself how I want to be. And so one of my kids was having a rough night the other night with some emotions. And I remember sitting down and having that conversation of, it's okay to be upset. It's okay to be angry, but you have total control and it's a choice and nobody can ever take that away from you, over how you respond and how you react and the choices that you make and your attitude. And now it's kind of not a running joke, but whenever somebody's, kind of having an off day, I'll say, okay, attitude. And they'll say, is a choice. We know. But it's just something that we've really tried to hammer
finishing your
into
sentences,
them.
right?
Yeah. But we've tried to hammer that concept into them. And I think we're seeing the fruits of that in, seeing them deal with these difficulties and yet coming out the other side of it, maybe a little bit better, a little bit stronger for having gone through that. And, trying to guide human beings, like little human beings and little impressionable human beings through the world today with social media, with all the influences and all the things that they have out there. I mean, that is, I know it's not for me and my wife. I mean, we're very grateful and we've had a lot of good support for it, but it's, I learned a lot from my kids. I learned what it's like to be, they taught me what it's like to really put somebody else's needs above my own, ahead of my own, and what it's like to be humble, what it's like to have patience. And a lot of those qualities, I think that we could all use a little more of sometimes.
What would you say, Chris, to a family that's just starting out, has young kids, and they come to you for advice? What's the advice you give them?
What's the curly one thing?
Yeah,
right?
what's the one thing?
The one thing, make sure your sippy cups all have lids.
Yeah,
that's important.
That is important. We've got through many a couch because of that rule being broken.
Like, lots of messes. No, I think the one thing that I would say is, you need to set the example. Kids are so perceptive. They see everything. They see every action, every word, everything that you do. And in their little world, when mom and dad are their world, they're going to see that and they're going to think that's how it is to act. Coming back to my job, I've seen generations. I've seen the dad that's always getting arrested. And then 10, 15 years later, now we're always arresting that kid. And then we're arresting that kid's kid. And then we're arresting that kid's kid or whatever. And it's just this cycle of, they get that from the parents. So you're a product of your environment, in a lot of ways. And so I would tell new parents, make sure that you model the behavior that you expect. You can't do the whole, because I told you so. Yeah, that doesn't work with kids. You
do
have
as I
to,
say, not as I do, right?
Yeah, exactly. You can't do that. You have to when you find yourself getting frustrated, you have to be able to take a step back and go, okay, I'm going to choose to act a little bit differently here and show them, what is appropriate and what is acceptable. And I think if you start that when they're little and when they're really, really young, I think it really sets that foundation if they see, and that becomes the norm. If there's something else I could throw out there, um, tell your kids that you love them. Tell your kids that you love them. Tell your kids that you care about them. I'm not like trying to espouse that everybody gets a participation ribbon, sort of thing, but when they do good work, you have to have positive reinforcement. I mean, I know a lot of people, that grew up in a generation. My dad's dad, was one of those where, you could count on one hand probably the number of times that he told, my dad and his siblings that he loved them. It just wasn't talked about, back in the 50s and 60s and all that. You just didn't say things like that. And it's important. I mean, as a man, you have to be able to be vulnerable and tell your kids, I love you. I love you for who you are. I love you despite, warts and all, as you guys like to say. You have to have that positive affirmation. And when they screw up, you have to deal with it. But you have to do it in a loving way. And that can be hard. That can be hard at 3 o'clock in the morning when you got a screaming kid who's not going to sleep or whatever else. And, but again, that perspective of what you're trying to accomplish and, how you're trying to mold these people into, decent, productive, faithful, law-abiding human beings. I mean, you got to start that when they're little.
I'm curious, Chris. So you've been married for how many years now?
Oh, I should know this right away.
Yeah, this is we'll edit this, man. I'm sorry.
No, it's all good. No, actually 20 this December will be 21. So we've been married for 20 years and this December is 21.
Okay, so almost 21 years. You've got children that are in high school, some are getting ready to launch, right? You've got a career that's different, has a unique set of challenges. What gives you hope these days?
I think the biggest things that gives me hope is my kids, because I see them as a future. I remember, when I was a baby policeman, I looked up to my leaders, my sergeants and lieutenants, and I saw them as these like old, grizzled, wise, know everything. These guys know what they're talking about, as these leaders. And now I'm sitting kind of in that spot where, I have, some leadership positions, and I hope people look to me and go, man, that's that guy. That's kind of who I want to be like someday. And I look at my kids and I see the trajectory that they're on. And sometimes there's some course corrections in there, obviously, but I see the general path that they're on and the direction that they're heading. And it gives me hope that, when they become these leaders, people are going to look to them and they're going to say, I want to be like Allison Smyrnos. That's somebody who I look up to. I wish I could be like Ian. That guy has his life together. That guy is doing it. I want to be like Marissa. She's just on fire with whatever she does. She's just an incredibly passionate human being. I see them and developing into these future leaders, and I see them, running government positions. I see them in church leadership positions. I see hope that, the family that my wife and I had created, that, these kids, these people that we've been put in charge of, these little human beings, are going to be in positions where they're going to be, have, stewardship over their own families. They're going to have stewardship over their own, responsibilities in the positions that they're in. And that it's exciting. It's exciting to see them at this stage in their life, like you said, like getting ready to launch, and where that's going to lead. And, sky's the limit. And that's coming back to why we take them out of these different places and why we try to give them these experiences, is because we want them to see there's a big world out there and they really can do anything they want. As long as they're passionate about it and they care and they're doing the right things.
I'm curious about how you would answer this, right? Because very rarely do we talk to people that like wear Kevlar and guns every day. But what are you afraid of?
I've been thinking about that. One of the things that scares me the most is letting people down. I have a hard time if I make a decision or if I, have an interaction and that person walks away from that going, you know what, that person let me down. He didn't do what he needed to do. He didn't do what was the right thing, what I think is the right thing to do. And that's hard because sometimes in leadership positions, you have to have difficult conversations with people. You have to hold people accountable. And sometimes, some people take it okay and some people don't. But that worries me. And that's something that's always on my mind. Not because I want people to like me, but like I said, I don't want to let people down. I don't want to let the people that I have charge over or that I care about, I don't want them, like I said, I don't want to let them down. I don't want them to come away from an interaction where, they walk away thinking, man, I'm worse off having that conversation or that interaction with Chris. And I've had those experiences. So, and it
I love
sucks.
that answer, Chris. I think that for, it's funny because, gosh, it's been how long since I've been up in Reading? It's been a while, right? But one of the things I loved about, you and I had a chance to kind of serve together in some different capacities. And I always felt like Chris is reliable, man. Like he says he's going to do something.
Guy.
He's a go-to guy. It's like he says he's going to do it. He's going to do it. Never thought twice about it. And the other thing I love is that you enjoy. There's just a happiness that comes off of you, and it's palpable. So that's awesome, man. I think that I love that answer. I think that you're letting people down is a fear for someone who makes lifting people up a priority, right? And yeah. I know that about you, that's a priority for you. So that's awesome.
Can you name something that you've learned in life the hard way?
I've learned in life the hard way that once words leave your mouth, you can't bring them back. You know what I mean? And so yeah. I think that I think we're all guilty of that.
We know what you mean.
Exactly what you mean.
and that's a hard one because like sometimes I shoot from the hip a little bit when I have conversations with people, and I try to speak what's on my mind, and I try to do it in a way that I think is appropriate. But there's been some interactions that I've had, even recently, where it didn't come off the way that I wanted it to. And so then I try to reflect on those moments and try to say, okay, that obviously didn't work the way that I thought it was going to. So what went wrong?
I saw that going differently.
I saw that going differently in my head. That wasn't quite, how it went. And I think the other thing that is kind of interesting to me is that, the more responsibilities that you have, so whether, the higher up you go in an organization or, within your family or within your church or with whatever the context is, the more prominence that you have, the bigger your rock is. And what I mean with that is like, I think of like like in the police context, if you have a police officer and they say something, right? They have a rock, and that thought or that action or that thing that they said, they throw that rock into a lake and it has some ripples. Police officers they're in the public eye. There's cameras everywhere. You have a cop that, that says something bad to a citizen or whatever else. And yeah, that's going to cause some problems. Probably for that officer, it may have some ripples that go out, a little bit farther, depending on what it was. Sometimes those ripples can go really far, but every rung that you go up in an organization, your rock becomes bigger. So, we have different ranks. We're paramilitary. So you have some different ranks. So as an officer, you say something, it has an effect. Then now you're a corporal, you've been promoted. Now you're a supervisor and you have a crew of people that you're responsible for. Your rock becomes a little bit bigger. And so when you say something, now that carries more weight because of that elevated position that you have. And now when you're a sergeant, it takes even greater weight. Now you have a bigger rock. Hey, did you hear what the sarge said? This is what the sarge said. This is what the boss said. This is what the, and that thing that you said carries a lot more weight. And then you become a lieutenant, and now you're part of the command staff in our organization. And now you are the agency and represent the department. So you go into a room and you say something off the cuff, you got a big rock, and you just toss that rock into the pond. And those ripples, and they can be much bigger, have much bigger ramifications. Now you're the chief of police.
The interesting thing about that is you think you're saying it is Chris,
yeah,
right, or Mike or Tyler, but because of the rock, it's not you. You can't change it.
Sometimes you're not cognizant of the rock that you're carrying. You know what I mean?
And you're like, oh, I'm just Mike, and I'm being flippant.
Yeah, I relate to the shooting from the hip kind of thing, and there's been times where that's bit me right in the rear end. So yeah.
Yep. Yeah, and that was a hard lesson I had recently. Like I said, I'm the director of the communications center, and so I'm kind of the buck stops with me guy for all things dispatch. So I got a pretty big rock, within that dispatch center, and sometimes shooting from the hip, or having a conversation, that I think is, like I said, Chris to person. It doesn't work that way. And so I think, being aware of that, and being aware that your words, have power, and the things that you say, like I said, it's kind of like a bullet leaving a gun. We train our folks that once you've made that decision to shoot and you pull that trigger, there's no takebacks. There's no oh shoot, I didn't mean to do that. Sorry about that. Once you get past that point of no return, that it's gone.
It's
and
out
you're
there.
responsible for whatever happened. That's the same with your words.
Once those words are released, you're not getting them. You're not getting them back.
Hard to clean that up. Yeah, I'm curious, Chris. So this space on this podcast is really about honoring people, and for Mike and I, tonight's been about honoring you, Chris. I mean, we think the world of you, and it's it's been fun to kind of hear and be taught from you and learn from you tonight. And so that's been a lot of fun. But you've talked about Julie and her influence on you. You've talked about your dad. Are there other people that you'd like to shout out in this forum and recognize here on this podcast?
I have a lot of heroes in my life. Not to get all, again, not mushy on you guys, but I really look up to Mike Freeman, as an example of, kind of the person I'm trying to strive to be sometimes. There's a guy that I know, his name is Sean Sumption, and he's somebody that I serve with, and he is somebody that I admire to the ends of the earth. And I see his, like I said, I know it's on his plate, and I know what he has to deal with. And he's a man that I greatly look up to. Physically too, because I'm kind of short, so I look up to most people. That's just how it is. But no, I look at my, in my work, there's people that have been, coaches and mentors and that have guided me throughout my career. And so I always try to I don't know. It's kind of funny because I'm not I don't try to be like a look at me kind of guy. I'm not somebody that I don't enjoy the limelight. I don't enjoy, the spotlight for things. I'd rather just kind of fade into the background, do my thing. And so to even be, to be mentioned in the same conversations as some of these people that I look up to is very humbling to me. Like I said, even you guys asked me to come, the thought that I would have, worthwhile things you guys want to hear from me. I mean, that means a lot to me. Cause like I said, this is not I don't seek these things out, generally. And so, but no, I look at people that I think are, that I look up to, that I know are trying to do their best. They're trying to make the right choices. They have that passion, kind of that foundation of caring that we talked about. I look at them and see how they interact with other people, and I know they're people that won't let me down. And those are people that that I put on a pedestal and that I really admire. And I try to be better, and I try to be like those people. Oftentimes I fall short. But those are, like I said, my dad, my wife, those are all people that, I admire to the ends of the earth. Mike and Sean and those people I talked about. I mean, those are some of my personal heroes, and people that I strive to be like.
Yeah, I love that.
I'm touched by that, but make no mistake, there are people watching you. There are people watching you and your family and the way you're doing it, right? And you're doing it right. And in a dark world, like we understand the backdrop is getting a little darker these days. The idea of letting light shine, right, and doing it the right way for other people. I think that it's interesting that you mentioned Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning, right? Because he teaches about this idea of happiness. If you're trying to chase it, you'll never get it. But when you lose yourself in the service of other people, boom, you find happiness falls right in your lap. And sometimes when we're just the go-to guy and we're showing up and we're just trying to do it the right way, in the end, it turns out you look back and it's like, whoa, I kind of laid a path for how to live a rich life. And we love that. And we'd love for you to, you've introduced the players in your life. Now paint us a picture, right? Give me a moment, Chris, when you're looking around and everything just feels rich, right? Maybe it's a place. Maybe it's the people you're with. Maybe it's the French Riviera or something. Talk to me about a moment when you look around and it's maybe one of those mountaintop moments where you mentally take a picture of like, this is what rich is like.
Like I said, for me, it's kind of like, those moments for me are often not like big grandiose, moments. They're not these like big, I'm not standing, on a proverbial mountaintop. Sometimes I'm in the middle of a valley, and yet I have these experiences. So like I said, my parents live in Virginia near my sister, but they still have a house out in California, so they come back from time to time to take care of things. And so my dad was in town, and so he drove up from Grass Valley, and we all went out to dinner. And I'm sitting in the restaurant, I'm sitting in the booth, and I've got my wife sitting on this side of me, I've got my dad sitting on this side of me, and I had all three of my kids, sitting in the bench across the table from us, and we were just talking. We were talking about life and what was going on, and I've got and in that moment, I kind of like I had this like flash of like, this is pretty awesome. Here I am, with my father who lives, across the country. Here I am with my wife, and it's kind of rare nowadays for all three of my kids to be available within the same window of time because of everything they have going on, and my wife. And sometimes we go out and it's like me and like two of the kids, or my wife and somebody else, or so to be there together as a family, just kind of just enjoying each other's company, that means a lot. That means a lot to me. And sometimes when I'm having a rough time, or I'm having a rough patch, like I said, I've kind of alluded to it a little bit, but the last couple of weeks I've had some rough things going on, kind of in the work world right now. And to come home and know that I've got a roof over my head, I have a job that provides for my family. I have, I walked in the door today after kind of a rough day at work, and everybody was laughing and joking and wanting to show me something on their phone. They found some funny thing or whatever. And so it's like, what? It's these moments where, I look back, and sometimes I'm like, I don't know if I deserve, to have the life that I have right now. But I'm darn grateful for it. I'm grateful for, my wife and my kids. And I think just, again, perspective. It's having that perspective and knowing that, you can choose to be grateful for the things that you have, or you can choose to be, longing for the things that you want. And you can choose to see things different ways. And so I try to see things, I'm typically a pretty glass half full kind of guy. But rich moments for me are when I know that, the choices I've made in my life have brought me to this point, with a lot of help from, a lot of people, and from, people upstairs. But just knowing that, I'm part of something bigger than myself, with my family, and seeing my kids launch, and seeing, my wife, excelling in what she's doing, and seeing the people that work with me, meeting their goals. And just knowing that I had a part of that. That's something that I hold near and dear, is knowing that, I've helped people get to where they are. I don't take credit for the work that they do to get there, but just knowing that, I had a hand in maybe helping somebody get to where they need to be that means a lot to me. So.
Man, that's a good answer. And in the spirit of trying not to sound have repetition here, I got to tell you, Chris, this show is all about exploring richness, right? Exploring what that life looks like, exploring really kind of what the journey looks like, right? And I hope that one of the blessings for me in having conversations with you tonight, and with our other guests that we've had on this podcast, is that it's changed my perspective. It's improved my perspective. It's given me a different perspective, right? So like, I love that's been a focal point of the conversation tonight. And I love the exploration of a rich life, and it's funny. You said, I don't like the limelight. And as you were saying that, I was thinking that's exactly why we have you here, because you're that guy that doesn't like the limelight, and people need to hear from the guy that doesn't like the limelight, because you're doing something right. This show is Mike talked about It's Wonderful Life and George Bailey. And we love the irony of that, right? Because his life is in tatters. He's a mess. He doesn't want to live, right? He goes through this
Police
whole
have a warrant.
right. He goes through this whole exploration, and he comes out on the other side wanting to live, and recognizing all of the great things in his life, even in the midst of some really tough things. And so, in that spirit, we ask our guests at the end of every episode the same question, and we pose that question to you, Chris. What does it mean to you to be considered the richest man in town?
It means to me that I'm trying my hardest every day to be better, and to be grateful for what I have. You know, the concepts and the ideas of perspective and choice are ones that I hold very, very dear to me, and things that I talk with my kids about. This, I look back at my life. My life is a blessing. I was blessed with great parents. I was blessed with a great spouse, great children. And I'm just so grateful for those things. I always had this thing in my head when I was kind of a kid, like, I think at one point in my life, I told myself, if I could just make $50,000 a year, then I'll be totally happy forever, because that's just money. That's just how much money I need. And I've always told myself, like, I never wanted to be like financially like rich. I never wanted to have money like as a status. I've always wanted to be able to support my family and be comfortable and those sorts of things. But for me, like, richness really like involves around the people that I surround myself with, and it has to do with the interactions that I have, and just being grateful for what I have. And I think sometimes it's hard to see that when you're in those valleys. For me, being rich is being able to stand up on those mountaintops and look out at everything and seeing what I have, turn around, looking back and seeing, what it's taken me to get where I'm at. But that's what it means to have a rich life for me, is just knowing that I am incredibly blessed, with my family, my friends, and that I think that's a good way to sum it up. I'm just grateful for everything that I have, and a lot of things I don't think I deserve. But I just, be happy for what you have and live every day to try to be a little bit better.
Well, I commend you, because what I love about this is you have excuses you could have played in life with the career that you've chosen. There are many, like we talked earlier about the jaded nature of your job. And sometimes you see everyone at their worst. You see kind of what the worst of what humanity has to offer. And it could be really easy to become kind of that half full guy. And I love the 2 hours that we've been able to hang out here together, right? Because we've smiled, we've laughed, and this idea that we can make choices with wherever people are at across our listener spectrum. There's a choice to be made, and that choice can help us be better. And waking up every day, striving to be better. I love that definition of a rich man, right? Rich men or women wake up every day with a commitment, like, hey, let's do something to be better. Love that.
You're a rich man, Chris Smyrnos. We've loved the time, man. I can't tell you how grateful I am to be able to spend some time with you tonight. This has been a real treat for me, and I know I can speak for Mike in that as well. We love you. We appreciate you.
Long overdue.
100%. When like I said, when your name was brought up, I told Mike, why haven't we done this before? Like, what are we doing? So I'm just grateful for you, man. And make sure that you tell Julie that we appreciate her and her sacrifice for giving us you for a couple hours. I know that's a sacrifice for everybody. So we appreciate you. And we need to do this again soon.
Yeah, I appreciate the offer, and it's always great catching up. If you're ever in town and you want to go knock out some racquetball, let me know, and
it's game on, dude.
I'll show you what's what again.
Okay, yeah, it's game on for sure.
Pick up right where you left off.
I love
we
it,
used to
man.
play all the time, man.
Yeah, dude. Well, hey, you have a great night. We love you. We appreciate you, and we'll be talking real soon.
All right, thanks, guys.
To my big brother George, the richest man in town.